Hello and welcome to the penultimate instalment of Politics Live, Upstart's broadcast dedicated to bringing you the latest from the 2016 federal election. We've been providing running analysis of the campaign by recapping the news of the week and asking how the strategy of each party is playing out more broadly. I'm Rudy Edsel, your host, joined by Uni Poll Watch student editor Matthew Almus.
Hey.
And Kate Kelly, the Upstart's incoming co-editor.
Great to be here, guys.
It's lovely to see your face this freezing cold Friday down here in the Upstart bunker. How have you seen the week, Matt?
Well, we've kind of been bogged down this week in Medicare a fair bit.
Bit stagnant.
Yeah, well, a little bit. It's weird given that we're only just under a fortnight now. Well, we're under 2 weeks.
A week and a little bit. What about you, Kate? How have you seen it?
Oh, I would say exactly this. It was
exactly
Medicare
the same
week.
Thing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Medicare week. All right, so let's recap with the headlines, starting from Labor. They started the week embroiled in controversy. Their candidate for Farah, Christian Kunde, I believe it's pronounced, he has been alleged to have ties to an extremist Islamist group named Hizb ut-Tahrir, and that's obviously a source of concern for them. I believe he's stepped down now. The coalition started the week on the back foot. They've been weathering Labor's ongoing allegations about them privatising Medicare. We're going to have more on that a little bit later. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull then did what was considered the riskiest move of his campaign thus far. He did a spot on Q&A. He did it with a cold, battled through, answered a series of questions from viewers, and he even took one from an asylum seeker being held on Nauru. Tuesday brought the gift of the Liberal Party's fake tradie ad, which we'll discuss in a bit more depth later. The Prime Minister then moved the agenda to an Indigenous land handback to the Kenbi people in the Northern Territory. Wednesday brought bad news to the Labor Party, with the Australian Medical Association coming out in support of the coalition's changes to the Medicare payment system. Penny Wong went on the offensive, bringing same-sex marriage back to the forefront of the agenda by claiming that a plebiscite campaign would incite hate speech. Now, this split the coalition ranks a little bit. Cory Bernardi took a public swipe at his own Prime Minister for allegedly supporting a claim that he's a homophobe, and Scott Morrison weighed in on same-sex marriage, indicating that hate speech is a two-way street and that religious people also feel that pain. Now, what did you make of that, Kate? I'm interested to know what you thought about Scott Morrison's comments.
Broadly, I thought it was rather, to put it diplomatically, not the best political move he could make. ScoMo is all for the plebiscite, and I think there's a decent argument to be made for the plebiscite. No matter where you sit on the agenda, you can argue it in a roundabout way. It's about all voices coming together. It's about everyone having a share, and he should have just stuck to that. But instead, he just entered the identity politics, which that was never going to go well. No. And also, to separate it, if you want to talk about religious, bigotry or persecution that religious people feel, don't do it while you're talking about queer issues. There's no comparison can be made there. No. So it played right into the left. It was a smooth handball. It was not that ScoMo is a poster boy for, progressiveness or anything, but it essentially just reconfirmed what everyone thought about him anyway, made him look foolish. And he had the opportunity to be like, this is what the plebiscite is. It's about our nation coming together, having a dialogue, voting together on where we want to go as a future, which is a decent argument to put up, whether you're for it or you're not. You can make that argument easily. He should have just stuck to that, because then we had, 48 hours of ScoMo suffering, which was amusing. It was entertaining, but it was it was a waste of time. Yeah.
Well, yeah, arguably it was. We'll come back to that shortly, but we want to start off this week with the Medicare scare campaign, as it's been christened. Now, Matt, you've got some. Run us through what's happened here with Labor.
Yeah, so I guess this all started on Sunday with last Sunday with Labor's campaign launch. They, Bill Shorten did the typical Labor campaign launch speech. They got the Labor brass out in force, the former PMs, and he came out and said, the coalition have a plan to privatise Medicare. It's worth probably noting that they've been going with this messaging for months now. This isn't a new thing, but they've definitely stepped it up this week. The media was on top of it very quickly. There was lots of accusations being thrown around that this is a scare campaign, especially after the coalition came out and unequivocally said, Malcolm Turnbull came out and unequivocally said that no element of Medicare was going to be privatised. Labor's claim is still claiming that they're going to privatise Medicare, although they have started to step it back a little bit. I just wanted to read something from Laura Tingle in the Australian Financial Review earlier this week. She summed up kind of what Labor's claim is based on quite well. She says, Labor is relying on a Productivity Commission reference from the Coalition about the delivery of human services to back its attack. If you read its terms of reference, it's not about Medicare, but a range of health and social services, and reflects an examination of the whole process of contracting out, which has been underway for at least 20 years. Contracting out public services doesn't always work, but whether it does or not, a bad outcome for the white-hot politics that now surrounds Medicare is that the very real problems in the system designed to deliver it and the government services, all built on a thoroughly antiquated IT system, may not be addressed. I think that sums up kind of what this messaging is really all about. The Labor Party has come under a little bit of fire. The AMA came out earlier this week and they said, we would support changes to the payment system. It's out of date, it's clunky, it needs updating. And since then, the Coalition have jumped on that and said, hey, yeah, we will update the payment system. We'll do it from within government, but we will update the system. And they've gotten a lot of praise from the sector.
What do they actually want to do?
So right now the payment system is, I think, 25 years old. So what they're going to do is start a process within government to update that system and make it work more efficiently and effectively, because at the moment the payment system is sort of like a bottleneck for the system that's kind of weighing the whole thing down. So it's quite bad news for Labor, who a lot of people were saying were hoping that they would be able to carry this for 2 weeks and up until the election day, but it seems like it's already started to trail off, and Labor are under a bit of pressure to find a better attack dog pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Who do they run in that attack dog role?
Well, they did come out on same-sex marriage a bit more this week. Penny Wong came out, and that's kind of
that's a different scenario altogether, though.
Sure, but that's trying to that is shifting the agenda. So what you try to do is you shift the messaging. You either try to stop the other party from being on message, which the Medicare thing did pretty well for about a week. And then the Coalition kind of got on top of that. But then, you start throwing same-sex marriage into the agenda and you try to throw the Coalition off more, whilst at the same time looking strong yourself. But the Medicare issue has carried not as well as I think Labor were hoping. The media were on it extremely quickly, and the Coalition just came out without an issue and equivocally said they weren't going to privatise Medicare. And I don't think Labor were expecting that.
Now, do you think, surely, Kate, no government in Australia is ever going to fully privatise Medicare? Surely that's more or less political suicide, that kind of consideration.
I would agree with that tentatively. I mean, I can't, who knows what's going to happen in 15, 20 years.
Oh, but, yeah, I mean, but...
I think Australians are quite comfortable with having Medicare and they like it a lot. And you saw it when Abbott was trying to increase, the $6 rebate, or like the $6 payment not increase. Everyone turned around and was like, no, you can't touch that. So I think we like that we have Medicare. We're okay with healthcare. It's one of the things that we generally accept, that the electorate generally accepts is good for our nation and our country. And I think it is ingrained in our sort of cultural ethos to have that policy in place. But it's so exceptionally easy for Labor because, over the last few years, there have been Liberal attacks on Medicare as a whole and on specific aspects of it. And what this whole thing is going off is something, Malcolm Turnbull raised in the Parliament 6 months ago, just kind of floated the idea. And now they're like, oh, he's going to touch it. And it's across all of their branding. Like, they've done a brilliant job at making like a mountain out of not even a molehill, like nothing. Like nothing is there.
There's definitely an avalanche of sorts coming down that mountain now. It's falling apart extremely quickly. And there have been commentators that come out and said this may be a bit of a mistake from Labor to commit this hard to it. Lee Sales last night on 7:30 absolutely eviscerated Bill Shorten on this issue.
Eviscerated.
Tried to hold him down, and he wouldn't.
Held him down and eviscerated him.
Well, yeah,
violent imagery.
So yeah, quite quite interesting to see how Labor now, Tanya Plibersek coming out and kind of stepping back a little bit from what they're doing. I think Labor next week will try to move the agenda on a bit. I think the media will keep questioning them about it, but I think they'll try to move on.
But I also think it raises questions about their bigger campaign, because it's like, I know this is a very long campaign that we're in. Like, that's just the nature of it. But if we're getting to the week, we're getting to the 8th day before the election, and essentially Labor's massive thing for this week has been Medicare, and it's based on a complete lie. Like, there is no substance there. It's like you have to look at their campaign on a broader level and go, how did it get here? Like, where are the 100 positive policies? Where, like, one, it's negative. Two, it's just completely made up. Like, where are your positive things, guys? And why have you chosen to hone in on this?
Yes, that is a very good question. We'll get to that in a little bit. I feel that you talk about Labor needing to refocus the discussion. Is it maybe time for them to shine a spotlight more specifically on same-sex marriage, Matt?
Yeah, well, same-sex marriage is definitely something the Coalition don't want to be talking about a lot. Same-sex marriage did come back onto the agenda this week after the Friday night leadership debate, the first online debate on Facebook with news.com.au. Both the leaders were asked questions about the plebiscite, and it was clear very quickly that Bill Shorten was much more comfortable.
Won that debate, didn't he?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to say who does or does not win the debate.
The question is, if Bill Shorten wins a debate on Facebook and no one watches it.
Yeah, well, that debate definitely had a bit more back and forth than the press gallery debate, for instance. But with the same-sex marriage kind of questions, it was clear that Bill Shorten was a lot happier to talk about same-sex marriage than Malcolm Turnbull, because whenever Malcolm Turnbull's questioned on the plebiscite, he inevitably has to bring up that this was Tony Abbott's policy to have a plebiscite, and it's just carried over. And he did that on Q&A on Monday, and it was kind of passive-aggressive in a way, because, there was that slight, irking that he was kind of saying, yeah, well, this isn't my policy. I would just do. I always advocated a conscience vote, but this was Tony Abbott's policy, and I've committed to continuing that. So little bit of passive aggressiveness maybe there from the Prime Minister.
It's a constant reminder that he's still beholden to the conservative elements of his party, and that's, I think, as far as that plays out in the broader electorate, it's not. That reminder is not good.
Yeah, no.
Don't forget, you're listening to Politics Live with Matt Elmas, Kate Kelly and Rudy Etzel. It's 12 minutes past 1 here, down in the Upstart bunker. Now, Kate, you mentioned the conservative rump, I suppose, of the Liberal Party. Mm-hmm. Now, do you feel that maybe one of the Labor Party's best options here might be to try and wedge the more progressive faction of the Liberal Party and the...
Oh, without a doubt. You'd want to be attempting to monopolise on this as much as possible.
The way the Liberal Party wedged Labor on asylum seekers.
Yeah, you'd want to be going back and doing it to them on marriage equality, because whilst it's not like... Matt, you were saying before, whilst it's not an issue that's going to win them the election, it's an issue that they can run on and they can win on easily. Because all they have to do is, which was what they did this week, is send Penny Wong out to make an exceptionally impassioned speech to the nation that everyone gets up in arms about, because, everyone's kind of the rough statistic is 75, maybe a little bit over 75% of us.
75.
Yeah, Australians.
Then you just Scott Morrison or George Brandis put their foot in their mouth.
So it played out perfectly for them, because this issue they do have the monopoly on. They can go 100 days.
Bill Shorten's been doing that for quite a while. He's been, even 3 or 4 months ago, he was, coming out and saying that, Malcolm Turnbull's beholden to the right of his party. I believe Malcolm Turnbull does support same-sex marriage and would do a vote, but, he's caved in. They have definitely been doing that.
Now, no, you've thrown me off. That's what I was going to ask. Do you think that there's a feeling amongst the general electorate that same-sex marriage is going to happen anyway, and it doesn't sort of matter who they vote for? Like, once they go to a plebiscite, it'll happen, and there's just this sense that yes, same-sex marriage will eventually happen. It doesn't sort of matter who we vote for.
Yeah, well, I guess the question is same-sex marriage something that people vote on? Is same-sex marriage something that those swing voters that the Labor and Liberal parties are trying to grab at this point in the campaign, something that people, are going to go to the polls on. It's certainly, I don't think something that a lot of the Liberal Party constituency, I don't think it's something that the Liberal Party MPs think that their constituency cares too much about. I think that they're comfortable appealing to their own supporter base with the plebiscite kind of agenda, but there's definitely a concerted group of Labor voters to the left of the Labor Party that are a bit iffy on this question, and I think the Labor Party committing to a vote within 100 days of being elected is definitely positive from their perspective. But I think what we need to remember is that if we do go to all plebiscite, all the data shows so far. All the data in the past shows that the plebiscite would probably be successful, and there would be political pressure on most politicians, even the Conservative politicians, to support a yes vote, and that could empower Malcolm Turnbull's wing in the Liberal Party.
We've discussed at length Scott Morrison. Now, what did you make, Matt, of Cory Bernardi's swipe at Turnbull?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because we haven't seen this kind of thing happen for the last month and a half of the campaign. Early on in their campaign, we were seeing some disquiet in the Liberal ranks, and after even Lara Tingle came out and did a speech and basically was trying to decipher why the Liberal Party were playing up so much and trying to work out why they were being so pig-headed towards each other. But that kind of stopped. That's we haven't seen that for over a month now. So it was interesting to see Cory Bernardi kind of come up and make that play, and as well as Scott Morrison, who clearly, I think we talked about this before, went off talking points with his response to a question about hate speech. It's interesting to see how these kind of issues do kind of separate the Liberal camp a bit, and it's, as I said before, definitely something the Liberal Party don't really. There's things they want to be talking about, and this week they haven't got that much of a chance to talk about it. We've seen far less jobs and growth this week than we have in other weeks, and that's definitely
still a lot of jobs and growth.
Yeah, but
let's be clear.
But that's far more positive for Labor than the Coalition in that specific respect, because I think this week the Coalition would have liked to have spent a lot more time talking about their company tax cut, their plan for innovation, jobs and growth, than they did, and they ended up talking about same-sex marriage and refugees. Refugees is fine for them. They're comfortable with that policy, but they would rather be talking about their positive approaches rather than this hard decision they've said they have had to make.
Yeah. All right. Let's discuss a more broad look at how the campaign has gone for the major parties. So you talk about the Liberals and they want to focus on the economy or asylum seekers. How do you feel they've done controlling this narrative?
Yeah, asylum seekers especially has been something that they've been quite comfortable with. They've had this policy stance for a while, and they have been lynching Labor on it, definitely, because Labor have had this kind of issue within their party base. There are a lot more, left parts of the Labor Party that, want to support onshore processing and things like that. And the Labor Party, being a party that's trying to win government, has to appeal to that more centrist, sort of voter base that doesn't want onshore processing, and so they've had to take that hard stance, and their policy pretty much now mirrors the Liberal Party policy, except that nobody quite believes it because of what happened with the last Labor government, and so they're in quite an awkward spot with asylum seekers. And we saw, even when asylum seekers came onto the agenda earlier in the week, Bill Shorten really doesn't want to talk about asylum seekers, and Malcolm Turnbull is happy to talk about it when questioned about it, but would probably be rather talking about his economic plan. But asylum seekers is a question that's going to keep coming up, because especially when we have people in Nauru and things like that getting in the media because of tragedies that are happening over there. And early in the week we had a current affair of all groups. They got access and they did their story, and it's kind of jetted onto the agenda again. And then the boat came, and they turned it back, which was interesting.
So what happened with that boat?
Yeah, that boat was quite interesting, because from the Coalition were quite happy to come out and say, "Hey, we turned a boat back, guys," as if to say, "Yes, guys, we are turning boats back."
That's right. We're still the party that does that.
And we're seeing Peter Dutton come out of the woodwork. He's been somewhere for the last 3 weeks. We haven't heard much from him. He's been in his electorate, whatever, but he's come out again. He's like, "We turned
asked not to comment."
Yeah, we've turned the boat back, guys. We've done a really good job. This is our policy playing out, and they obviously wanted to get out there with that messaging a little bit. But it was definitely the case with the Labor Party just don't really have much to say in that sort of a scenario, because either they parrot the coalition or, and they're less believable when they try.
They're never going to have ownership over the issue. And it's like, I think every time Malcolm Turnbull comes out and says, Peter Dutton comes out and says, oh, we'll turn another boat back, which is happening quite frequently at the moment because there's an election on, well, more frequently than it usually does. I reckon like 5 swing voters go, oh yeah, maybe the Liberal Party are better, because we've just mentally as a nation got into this zone where that represents strength and security and prosperity, and that's what we should be doing. And Labor can never, until Labor adopts a actual just like sweeping reforms and a completely different policy that like probably is a regional solution, until they grasp and change the narrative, they're never going to have it. Like, they can never have this issue. It's just so off the cards. And it's been that way since Howard, because Howard exhibited strength with refugees.
He initially changed the conversation on refugees.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. And it's still going with the tone that Tampa set is still prolific and occurring today. And it's like, and then you had the arguably terrible policy of the, kind of Rudd Gillard years, where they were like, no, which I don't think it was as thought out. They were like, we want it to be humanitarian, but it's not like you just kind of change a few things quickly and then it all works out. And still, I think voters remember the image of the refugees landing on Christmas Island, that horrific imagery that was blasted all over our media. And so therefore, like, it all feeds in. Everything that Labor has done feeds in to the coalition's ability to have the monopoly on the strong stance on refugees. And until they hijack that narrative and completely overhaul it, they're never going to get it back.
Yeah, and they're probably not going to do that anytime soon. They have their convention on it. They made a decision. And, the backtracking on it now would just be extremely painful. So I think what we're going to hope, what I think Labor will try to do in the next week is either they'll continue with this idea that they think the Medicare scare campaign is a good idea, or I think more likely they'll try to move off that a bit, try to move on to a discussion about their policies for education and their policies with same-sex marriage, and try to disrupt the coalition as much as they can. But I think they've had a pretty good a solid campaign strategy up until the last week and a half. They haven't really made too many missteps, but it seems like maybe after that WA polling came out that showed they were a little bit behind, there was just a bit of maybe a change in thinking in the Labor Party camp, and they decided to come out with this scare campaign that's kind of put them arguably a little bit off track.
Speaking of the Labor Party, the UK Labor Party is now working to the assumption that the Leave vote will win in Brexit, and Nigel Farage, the UKIP, United Kingdom Independence Party head, has effectively declared victory for the Leave campaign, which is fascinating. Interesting to see how that plays out. The Leave currently leads 52% to 48%, with 120 authorities still to declare. So that's some international politics for you here on our domestic politics show. Sorry, guys, but this is the biggest news of the week.
It does have an effect on. It does have a marginal effect on. Well, you could argue whether it's marginal or significant effect on Australian politics, and there hasn't been much talk about it during the Australian campaign, because it's a big risk as a leader to come out in an election campaign, whether you're Bill Shorten or Malcolm Turnbull, and say, yes, I would rather this side or that side to win. It's the same with the US election. We've seen Malcolm Turnbull be very lukewarm, say, I'll work with whoever wins. Bill Shorten's actually done something that doesn't usually get done. He's come out and said, look, Trump is a this or a that. I'll work with anyone that gets elected. But Donald Trump is just out of this world.
It's easy. I think it's unnecessary for our current leaders to comment on the Brexit thing, because it's not even in our national psyche.
Yeah, and it doesn't benefit them to take a stance one way or the other, really. With Trump, maybe Bill Shorten's or Labor's idea is, yes, it does benefit us a bit to come out against Trump,
definitely,
especially when Malcolm Turnbull isn't doing that. But I think it would be weird to see them take a stance or another on Brexit, because it's something that they want to see play out. If they take a stance, then they're committed to something, and they have to stay committed to that. And
I think it's just unnecessary.
Yeah,
the whole Trump
completely.
thing is also really easy because it's Donald Trump, and so you can come out and be like, the guy is kind of silly, and everyone goes, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, all right, let's do it.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, Trump is a man of petty grievances, definitely. But I don't think if he does get elected president, I don't think he's going to let those. I don't think he's going to prosecute that, as a geopolitical,
No. Yeah.
tactic. Is he? He's not going to come out and I remember when you called me bad, so I'm going to cut trading ties with your country. He's not going to do that, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
you'd hope so anyway.
Yeah, it's
right?
just far better to be risk
Someone
averse
reassure me.
with international
I think you're right,
things.
Rudy. I think you're right.
You don't usually see a lot of opposition in terms of, at least in Australia, you don't see a lot of opposition in terms of foreign policy solutions in the last 5 or 7 years in Australian politics from either side of politics. There's been bipartisan support for most of the policies in that regard between the Labor and the Liberal Party. Maybe not so much when it comes to trade, but when it comes to things like Brexit or American election, it's been kind of let's just stay out of it and focus on our own thing. Yes,
indeed. We'll move on from there with. That's enough. That's enough Brexit and Trump talk. We'll move on to our most hotly anticipated segment, the Dutton of the Week. Now, I'm not going to describe it. Let's just play it.
Let me get this right. Mr. Shorten wants to go to war with my bank. He wants to go to war with our miners. Bill Shorten even wants to go to war with someone like me, who just wants to get ahead through an investment property. Well, I'll tell you what happens when you get a war going on the economy. People like me lose their jobs. So I reckon we should just see it through and stick with the current mob for a while.
Authorised T-Nut, Liberal Party.
So we had the hashtag fake tradie there. Now that ad caused, as I mentioned off the top, ad caused quite a lot of issues. Yeah. It's hard to fathom how that ad made it through not just the decision-making phase, but the filming phase, like the costume phase. The guy's wearing a $7,000 watch.
Yeah. There was some very funny quips throughout the week that this was kind of a boon to Labor's advertising budget. So if you were looking at kind of the spread between who would spend more on advertising, you'd have to attribute this spending to Labor's side rather than the coalition side because fake tradies certainly blew up a bit in their faces. It was all over. And it's one of those things that it's really easy for it to go viral. And you could argue that no publicity is bad publicity, but I think this kind of added to that idea that the coalition just a little bit maybe out of touch with the whole. And, it's really weird from the coalition's point of view trying to come out with a kind of tradie ad to try and grasp those union people who were so dead set against the Liberal Party anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of trying to wrestle this narrative of, the Liberals are for the battlers, and here's this guy sitting there like with his expensive jewellery. Clearly, it turned out he's a real tradie, but he doesn't look or act like one. He's got the coffee cup on side.
Well, not in the ad at least.
No, not in the ad at least. He's got his coffee cup on side. He's wearing his expensive jewellery. He's talking about his investment properties. Yeah. It's just the whole thing seemed quite tone deaf. And
the new media actually, the Fifth Estate, if you will, had an absolute field day with this pedestrian TV BuzzFeed. They joked about this for a solid 24 hours because they love these kind of hashtag fake tradie things.
Yeah, then the old media, I suppose, got on board it. And did you see that photo of the Sydney Morning Herald had people outside his house?
The Sydney Morning Herald
that was a bit
people
bizarre,
outside his house. Yeah, that was certainly interesting. And
what public interest does that serve?
Well, I guess the thought was trying to figure out if he was actually a tradie or not at that point. But by then it had kind of started to die down a little bit, and people had started to lose a bit of interest. But often the Dutton of the Week is a single person, but this time it was an entire political party really that dropped the ball a bit.
Just any political party, our governing political
party, the kind of
the people in charge of our nation, people that make the calls.
This ad out there. But I mean, from their point of view, this ad went viral, so I'm not sure how badly they feel about it. Although it did certainly blow up in their face a bit. Hashtag fake tradie is certainly something I think we're all going to remember.
That's right. That's right. And it will be one of the lasting images of this campaign. I'd say that guy sitting awkwardly with his coffee cup and expensive watch on the fake building site. And I think that's probably about enough for us today. We've got 8 days till the election. We'll be here for
getting there.
One last crack next week.
Yeah, election eve.
You've been listening to Rudy Etzel here. I've been joined by Matt Elmas, Kate Kelly.
Thanks.
We'll see you next week.
See ya.